Everybody. Welcome to another episode. Today I have Gillian Hill with us, and she is a copywriter specializing in brand voice and an editor for copywriters. She helps businesses own their voice to allow them to connect with right fit clients and stand out from their competitors. So today she's coming on to tell us 5 steps in a process to help you uncover your brand voice from your competitors and how to stand out with that. So welcome to the show, Gillian, and thanks for listening, everybody.
Welcome to the Savvy Scribe Podcast,
a podcast for healthcare professionals who are interested in starting their own health writing businesses.
I'm Janine, a registered nurse and your host. I'm a labor and delivery nurse, mom to these 2 incredible boys, wife to my best friend, and owner of 2 crazy Great Danes. I help nurses discover freelance writing as an extra income opportunity with help from my guests. Join us over on Facebook in the group Savvy Nurse Writer Community or savvynursewriter.com to join our course and membership to create your own profitable writing business.
Enjoy the show!
So, hey, Gillian, how are you doing today?
I'm well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Good. Absolutely. Thanks for being here. So tell everybody where you're from and what you do and a little bit about your background, how you got into it.
Yeah, sure. So you can probably tell from my accent already that I'm not an American. I'm from Scotland, but I live in the US. I live in Idaho. And so I was an attorney in Scotland, and then my husband and I both moved over here, 12 years ago for his work. So kind of arrived with 2 suitcases each. I had never even been to the US before. And we kind of got settled and we had kids and we moved around a little bit. And then when I was ready to start working again, when my youngest was 2, I didn't want to sit the bar. It was such a long time ago that I practiced in Scotland that I didn't even need to sit a bar there. So the thought of having to learn again with kids underfoot was kind of daunting. And I knew I wanted to be home for school pickups. And, I knew I was the one who was going to have to be there if a kid was sick. And I couldn't really figure out how a legal lifestyle was going to fit into all that. So while I had been home with the kids, I had got into fiction writing a little bit, and I had quite a lot of connections with other authors. So I actually started down this road as an editor for fiction writers. Sort of did it for free for friends, and then people would start to pay me and recommend me to other people. And then they would ask me for help with their blurbs and their websites, at which point I discovered that copywriting was even a thing. I didn't even know that until that point. And that's when I discovered that that was the thing that I really loved. So I got into copywriting, just taught myself really. And I still edit for copywriters quite a lot, because the way, I'm sure your audience know, the way that we write for the web, particularly copy and not content, when it's sales pages and websites and things like that, it's formatted very differently. We break the rules intentionally a lot. And so you can't a regular editor will fix your spelling and do grammar checks, but there's a lot of things about the flow and the process that are different when we're copywriters. So I edit for a lot of copywriters, and I started to specialize in brand voice, because both those things are about picking the exact right words to represent what your client's trying to say. Obviously, there's, so many different synonyms for a word. For educate, it can be learn or know or empower you to understand. There's so many different ways to go about it. So picking the right word is about being clear, but it's also really about reflecting your client's voice in the piece that you're writing for them.
Very good. Well, here's my question about that. Did you start writing fiction, or did you go straight into editing others?
I started writing it, and I have written some short stories that are published, and I am the eternal trying to write a novel but never get to the end of it person as well. So, yes, I did start by writing some myself, and I do really enjoy doing that as well.
What made you go into the editing side?
I think because I think maybe having been an attorney, I have that attention to detail thing. And so
for sure.
I don't know if anybody who's on here or who's listening, some people just, their brain is wired a certain way that they spot the errors more than other people do. And I'm always the person someone goes to that's, could you just check this before I send it out? I was always that person because I would spot those errors or where something just doesn't read and quite flow correctly, I would be the person people came to. So it started as just doing that work for friends who were also writing fiction, not even being paid, just helping them. And eventually they were saying, we should really pay you for this. You're doing us a great service here. So that's how I kind of fell down the rabbit hole of editing and copywriting.
Nice. That's so cool. How old are your kids now?
So now my youngest is 7 and my oldest is 11. So they're both in elementary school, and my youngest started kindergarten in the first year of COVID where he didn't go to school. Which I had this in my mind, this was going to be it. Now I work
this is the year. Yeah.
I was all ready that I was going to go full steam in the business when he went to kindergarten, because before that he was only going a couple of days a week, 2 hours here and there to daycare. And I would just do it in the pockets of time that we all know as parents, where you find those pockets of time. So I spent a lot of time with him, if you can see me sitting right here, while I talked to kids and tried to figure out grow the business. But I still managed to during that time. And now I basically work 9 to 3. I work 30 hours a week pretty solidly, and pen goes down at 3 o'clock and I go pick up the kids from school. Yeah.
And that's because we're moms. We just kind of figure it out. You want to do something, you got to figure it out, and then keep going with it, even when it's hard. And, my son was in first grade. So it was I got that year of this is what it's like without kids. And then he came home. I'm like, oh, no.
Yeah. There you go.
Remote the next year and a half. I was like, oh Lord.
Sometimes when I look back on it now, I wonder how we all did that.
No kidding. And then I'm like, I hope we never ever have to do that again.
Yeah. And my older one,
parents were always like, oh, that's got to be hard. Yeah. It is, Mom.
Well, my oldest was in 3rd grade, so he could kind of handle himself on the computer. You could put him on his time with his teacher. But yes, kindergarten, even probably 1st grade and 2nd grade are really struggling at that level. So,
and now they're struggling. A lot of these kids, whatever, it's funny, whatever they were learning at the time, that March time when we all went home, is where I've heard the teachers say that's where these kids are struggling. So every grade kind of struggles with a different thing. And so that's got to be tough too. It's interesting. And then socially everybody's screwed up, but that's
absolutely.
So moving on, one question I had, because I know this is probably a question from a lot of newer writers who aren't used to copywriting, but you hear about these different types of editing. So what is the difference between editing copywriting and copy editing?
Well, and so honestly, this is one of those things where if you ask 10 different people, you'd get 10 different answers, which I think is why you should never be embarrassed if someone asks you either that they are going to do that, or if you want someone to help. I would say never be embarrassed or think you shouldn't know the answer, and ask them to be clear about what they mean. When I edit for copywriters, I edit on an hourly rate. I do all my writing work on a project rate, but it got to the point where different people need different things as they edit, and it's easier for me just to do that on an hourly rate, which in reality means I just do whatever you need me to do, all the way from developmental editing, which as a fiction writer is making sure the structure is solid. So sometimes it'll be you're missing part of the plot development. So I can do an equivalent to that I do sometimes for writers, where I'll say the structure of this doesn't make sense. You've jumped from an introduction to process, but you've not explained the importance of the process, say, or whatever that might be that they need in the flow. And particularly on sales pages, where we have a kind of specific order to things we have to approach with the audience, dealing with pain points and the different kind of formulas we might use as copywriters, then I can help with that kind of thing, which I call developmental editing, but that's because I come from a fiction background. I don't know what any other kind of editors would call that. And then sometimes copy editing means the person who collects together all the pieces. So in a larger business, they might be deciding the strategy for what pieces are going up on their blog, say, and making sure that all the pieces sort of follow some strategic coherence. So therefore they might want them written in a certain way to match, or what order they get put out in. And it's not really to do with the red pen at all. And then sometimes line editing, which is another thing that really comes from fiction, is if the structure of each of your sentences are like a little wrong. It's not just the equivalent of Grammarly, but actually saying this sentence would be stronger if we move the verb to the beginning or the end, or, you know, whatever that might be to make the writing more solid. So it to me, editing is about making sure that the writing is clear and, as a copywriter, compelling. So clear is it's really obvious what you mean, and as quickly as possible, it's obvious what you mean. And compelling is that persuasion that it makes somebody want to read on and learn more. And that's really where that voice will often come in, is, does this sound like your client, or is it boring and stuffy and buttoned up and we're not really there's nothing to compel someone to read on. So yeah, it's getting the balance of those two things right, really.
Yeah, exactly. I like how you answered that question. So thank you. So today, let's get into the meat of the topic here. So we're talking all about a 5-step process to help you uncover your brand voice and stand out from your competitors. So I'm just going to let you take it away. So
okay,
thank you. Like, why do we need this first off? And then go ahead and into that first
Absolutely.
step.
And I will say, I will mention what all the steps are. I have like a Google Docs worksheet, which
I have that for you guys.
You've got that, perfect.
I'll put it in this chat and over on Facebook. So
perfect. And really the steps I'm going to go through here are, I'm not going to go into the detail of what's on the worksheet, but I'll explain what the main steps are, and it's all on that Google Doc there. So before we get started, I guess what I would say is that what brand voice is, there's two parts to voice. And one is, it's how we communicate our personality and our brand identity. And also, which I think is very important, is it's the frame in which the brand sees the world. Which I'll come back to in a moment, but I think that's almost more important than personality. And then the second thing, as writers, brand voice, how we communicate that frame of that we see the world and personality, is through very specific word and punctuation and sentence choices. It's which emojis we use and which GIFs and how long our paragraphs are. So there's the communicating those things in a very technical kind of linguistic way, which, if anybody is interested in, I have a course where you can learn some kind of basics about that and how to use things like Grammarly to learn about that. But if you're first getting into this, understanding the personality and identity bit first will take you a long way. And then if you would really like to geek out like me, then you can go and learn more about the linguistics of how to do that. But I would say that the reason that it's really important is that all through school, I would argue, and college, and our professional careers, especially if we had one before we were a writer, which most people did, we are taught to cover up our personality. So we're taught the formal rules at school. We can't start a sentence with and we've got to make sure that, certain things happen. And then in your professional career, often to sound professional, we kind of layer up and cover over our personality. But what that leads to is everybody's sounding the same, and we don't really get the sense of who you are. And I would say that this is a bit meta, because you should be thinking about this for yourself as you market your own writing services, and then think about how you can apply this for your clients when you're writing for them. So if you think about the old days, pre everybody being online, if you needed a doctor or you needed to go and buy bread or whatever you did, you just went to your village and there was one of each of those things and you just went to that person. And so all that really anyone had to communicate was that they were competent at the thing that they did. What is it you do? How will you do it? And that's it. But nowadays, especially in the online space, there are just so many of us who do the same thing. There's nobody out there, I believe, that's completely unique in what they do, that nobody else ever does it. And so if we want to stand out, we have to be more than just say that we're competent at the thing. We can't just say we do the thing. We have to show why someone would want to pick us over someone else who does it. So that's true as writers. And it's also true if you're a nutritionist or a chiropractor or anything else. This is the same for all businesses, and especially I would say service providers like we are, where if you're a small business and you are the face of your brand, you are the person who is probably going to be writing, or you're the person who's going to be giving the nutrition advice, so your audience really needs to connect with you before they come see you and know that you are the good fit person for them. So I think I wrote down this statistic the other day when I was looking. 77% of consumers buy from brands who share their values. So 77% is huge. And that includes like all the product-based businesses and things like that. And I would say that's even more true with service providers, because we're thinking about our approach to them. Like, are they going to be a good fit? Is the way they work going to match for me? If it's someone who's going to be talking to you a lot, you're going to be representing them in their business. They really want to know that. So I believe that by uncovering, and I think it's uncovering because we were taught to cover it all up when we were younger, as we uncover what somebody's personality and brand voice is, we can then show who they are. I would argue that once I really got into brand voice and understood my own brand voice, I don't even see sales calls. I don't even call them sales calls anymore, because when someone comes on that call, I don't need to sell myself to them. All of the things they saw about me on social media before they got on the call told them that I was a good fit. And the reality is that often I'm on a short list, say, so they're checking how, are you really who you said you were? Or are you truly the voice that you represented? And then it's often like logistics. I'm fairly transparent in my pricing online, so they already know budget-wise if we're in the right place. And then it's kind of a logistics call. It's almost like I'm checking, are they a good fit for me? And then also, are like, how can we work together? When can we do this? What does it involve? So it like kind of qualifies, and it also allows someone, if you wouldn't be a good fit, to walk away, because it's not good for anybody's business to have a bad fit client, because not only will they possibly be dissatisfied, they might question whether you did the service correctly, they might give you a bad review, but they're also not going to give you testimonials. They're not going to come back for more business. They're not going to refer you on to other people. So it's in our interest to find the collection of people who are a good fit to work with, because that's really going to help escalate our brand as we move forward.
I like that. And I like that you were talking about the sales call, how, it is a fit for both you and the client. And honestly, I feel like my messaging is kind of dialed in too, that by the time they get on a call, you've already, I guess you didn't attract those that aren't going to be a good fit, because you have already given them things prior to that call to let them know, this is what I do. This, we're a premium service. We're not, $5 articles, whatever that is, but
and trustworthy and whatever you might
and
want.
Trustworthy. Yeah. And I think even though my story is all over the website, when they do jump on a call, they always ask, like, tell me about your business. And and they say, I've already read about it, but tell me in your own words. And it's the same thing on my side. Like, I want to know a little bit about them, their role and stuff like that. So usually you're able to close a lot more calls, because or a lot more sales from the call, because that person's already a good fit. They already, like you said, kind of know your pricing, and they're usually okay with it. So then it's usually from there on, like an easy, seamless kind of reaction. So
it's kind of logistics. And if you think about this from yourself, if you've ever gone on a sales call where you're the purchaser, personally, I hate going on those calls where I'm worried I'm going to get sold to, because I don't know yet when I go on the call if I really want it or not. I don't have enough information as I go on the call. That's when I worry that someone's going to try and talk me into doing something that isn't right, which is that sleazy sales feeling we get sometimes. So I believe if you can give people, like, arm them with that information before the call, they are so much more comfortable to come on, because they've got a good sense in their mind. It's almost like, unless something doesn't work on the call, I will be hiring this person, rather than, I don't know if I want to hire this person or not, and I'm not sure what they're going to say, and I'm worried I might say yes and then get stuck with it afterwards. And there's so much by doing that passively in your social media, in blog posts you write, by like representing yourself online. You're doing that to all your audience and allowing them to self-select in or out before they even speak to you.
Yeah, perfect.
So should we get on to the 5 steps? Should we get going?
Yeah, let's do it.
So a lot of this is really brand strategy, which maybe you might have, your clients might know about if they had like logos and visual design created for them. And you might as well, as a writer, if you've had someone help with that. But for some odd reason, we don't often connect that brand strategy piece to our voice. And I'm not really sure why, because we use words to describe what those things are all the time. I feel like it's really easy to work on, like, in your business so much. And thinking about brand strategy is going one level up and working on your business, thinking about what your business means. And sometimes people say, well, I'm just too busy. I just want to get writing. I have all this client work to do. But just like you mentioned, Janine, if someone comes on and says, tell me your story, if you have practiced that story in the sense that you're constantly thinking about it and telling it and just, dialing it in, then that comes very easy to you on those calls. Even if you're kind of a little introverted and not comfortable talking about yourself, the more you think about it in your own kind of safe space of writing about it and working on brand foundations, the more when you're asked to present that to clients, you'll feel comfortable talking about it. And the other thing I was going to say is we talk a lot about identity. And if you're a business of one, it can be hard to know what's my personal identity and values and vision and what's my business. And when people ask about that, what I always say is we all wear all hats all day long. As a parent, you respond differently to things than you do with your partner, or if you were in front of a judge, or if you were out with your girlfriends for a drink. We all have slightly different hats. We wear in slightly different faces we represent to the world. And they usually heavily overlap in that kind of Venn diagram way, but it's not 100%. And it's the same with your business. There's a heavy overlap of who you are and who you are as a business owner, but it will not be 100% overlap. And doing these exercises really helps you pull out which parts of me are business me, really strongly business me that I want to represent to the world. And it also sometimes allows you to say, this thing here, this is private me, and I don't want to put this out in the world as part of my business. So that can really help as well. So the first step is to think about your purpose, which is like the why you are doing the business. Other than money, we're all doing it for money, and that's a good reason, and we shouldn't dismiss that. But there's almost always something else going on in there as well, right? Like why you're doing it. I like to think of that Simon Sinek, find your why. So he has this like concentric rings. And we often talk about the what, which is sort of where we interface with clients. What I do is I write. But one step in from that is the how you do it, which is your process. And then one step even further in the very center of the circle is the why. Why do you do it in the first place? And a lot of people kind of work from the outside. I'm a writer, and then try and come into the middle. And I believe, and Simon Sinek talks about, if you start from the why and work out, you'll have a much more cohesive, stronger sense of your brand that will make more sense to your audience as you talk about it. So the first thing, and you can do this, I would definitely do this for yourself first, but you can ask these questions to your clients as you're trying to get a sense of what their frame on the world is. One quick tip I would say, which isn't in the worksheets, is always record these calls. It allows you just to really listen to them. They will almost always express themselves more like themselves if you ask them to talk about it than if you ask them to write it down, because all those filters of formal 6th grade English teachers come back in again, and they struggle to write it the way that they would really say it. So record the call and take a transcript, and you'll really get a good sense of how they talk about what they do. And do it for yourself like that as well, I would argue. Like, take a transcript of yourself talking about it, and then see how you discuss what it is you do. So get that sense of the purpose, because that often gives that frame of like why they're doing what they're doing, and everyone has different reasons for that frame. And then the next step is your vision, which is like the vision for your business, where you want your business to be going. I think that really helps you clarify not just the audience you have right now, but like the audience that you want to have. Sometimes we can get stuck working with clients who were a good fit for us last year, but we're trying to up our prices. We're trying to change our, maybe like our services and our packages. And if we don't start to look forward at where we want to be going, we can get stuck with an old version of a good fit client rather than actually who's good for us now and who's going to be good for us in the future. So step 2 is really thinking about that. Like, what are you wanting to do? If money was no option, where would your business be in 5 years' time? It's those kind of questions. And then the third step is thinking about your mission, like what you're trying to achieve. And that definitely sits in that in the Simon Sinek circles. That's that middle one. It's like your process. It's how you do it. Because there's lots of writers. But how do you go about your process of writing that would be different to someone else? Someone might say, oh, I want to pick her or him to do this writing for me because I like their process. I'm also going to say that there's a definite feel that writers just like, they have good days and bad days, and somehow we just magically pull the stuff out of our head and write it. And I think that can cause clients to worry a little bit that like, what if you're just having a bad day? Like, how do I know? There's a lot of questions about, are you going to be consistent on your delivery time? Like, is your draft going to be ready when you said it was going to be ready? And if you can show that you have a process, it shows clients this is not a flash in the pan and one day you procrastinated and got writer's block and you just couldn't finish their draft. You have a process of how you work. You're a professional, and this is your career. This is not, sitting in your attic, starving artist style, and maybe you'll produce the draft and maybe you won't. So thinking about that, how you do it for your audience, I'm going to say a big part of that will probably be that they are also medical professionals. And so that's part of their frame on the world. It's not going to be the only thing that's going to be important to your client, to your audience, but I'm sure that's going to be one of the things that would be very important to them, that you have an understanding of what they do and be able to communicate that they're going to feel you're going to be very clear. So I would say that's definitely in that step for your audience. And then the fourth step is your values. And this is where you think about that business hat. Like, it doesn't have to be all your personal values out there in the world. You might choose to put some out more than others. And the same with your clients. I just took my son to a new general practitioner last week, and the first question on our form was, what pronouns do you use? So not all doctors would choose to put that there, and she's quite open that that's part of her values as a doctor, and that allows people to decide if that's a good fit doctor for them or not. Now, some doctors might not want to put that on their form. They might have a view, but they might not want to express it, so their potential audience know about it, and that's also okay. So part of this is thinking about what values you have, and then what values you feel are important to your business. I know this doctor personally, and so I know why that connects to her professional opinion as well as to her personal opinion. So I, for example, I talk about my mission being to own your voice, and I help people uncover their voice and own it. So I don't talk about many kind of political things that are happening on my social media, but I do talk about trans people having the option to say their pronouns or not, because that to me connects with my business vision and mission, which is to own your voice. I can't on the one hand say I believe people should own their voice and say, but not you. I'm going to tell you what I believe you should be called. So for me, it's a very personal and professional value that I choose to express in the world. There are other things that come up where maybe I wouldn't talk about it on my business account, because I wouldn't see it as relevant to bring into the business space. So that's all kind of like brand foundation things, really thinking about your personality and your frame on the world. And then I have one last step that's a little bit more, it's not all the way technically how you turn that into voice, but it's a little bit about how to write it. So on the worksheet, I'm just going to pick it up and show you so you can have a little look. There's these kind of what I call sliders, or dimensions of tone of voice. And they go from, there's 4 of them. One of them goes from funny to serious, and one goes from formal to casual, and one is from respectful to irreverent, and one is from enthusiastic to matter of fact. So there's one space right down the middle, and then you can be slightly to one side or the other, or very far to one side to the other of those sliders. So it's quite a high level way of looking at voice, but if you haven't started yet to think about how you want to sound as you represent that, this is a good way to get started. Also for clients, if you feel that you don't have a great handle on how to talk about voice, or they maybe wouldn't understand what you were saying, it's a very easy thing for clients to understand. You're really only asking them 4 questions, but it can illuminate quite a lot about, they might say that they want to be matter of fact and irreverent, and then you could say to them, well, I'm not sure how we're going to do both those things. So it allows you to pull out and ask more questions. Sometimes you can ask them, do you know somebody else in your space that sounds like this? And you can go and read their things and say, oh, I see they sound irreverent here. I see they sound matter of fact here, but maybe these are 2 different places. And how are we going to do that in your writing, or in articles that we produce for you?
I really like this worksheet. I've been looking at it as you've been talking, and you guys, when you do this, it's going to take you time. Don't think
don't rush it.
Just as Gillian was talking that you could somehow finish it, because you can't. This is something though that you probably should print it off, or, be able to PDF it and write on an iPad, whatever you're doing, and take it to a coffee shop, a library, somewhere out of your house where no one's with you and just take a couple hours and sit and think about it, because they're not going to be easy questions to answer.
Mm.
And you may even need to write something to then read it back to yourself to kind of realize what type of voice you have. And we've talked about in our group the 7 whys, where, why did you start this business?
Yes.
And, say it is financial, but why? But why? But why? Why?
It's all
and then
this.
when you finally get to that 7th, you're like, this is why. Okay, now it makes sense. So, that first part of your brand's purpose, that's really important to start with, because if it is just money, it's not worth it. You're not going to enjoy it.
Do almost anything else for that amount of money that would probably be easier. So what's the passion that says this is the thing you want to do to make? I also feel bad sometimes because when I talk about this, I sound quite polished, that I know what my mission and vision are. But I literally talk about this all day long.
Don't feel bad. You're the expert. It's good.
But also, when I started this, it took me a really long time to figure this out. It can be scary because by defining yourself as one thing, that means you're ruling out something else. And when you're at certain stages in your business, that can feel like, am I going to be pushing people away? What I would say is that it will push people away, but you get more emphatic yeses. You don't get okay, maybe. You get people nodding their heads. And when someone reads your social media and they are nodding their head, like, that's your person and you know it. You're going to generally have a great relationship with them. They are going to be a super fan and they're going to recommend you to other people, and they're going to come back for repeat business as their business grows. So you don't want the people who are like, I guess I need a writer. Okay, this one will do. You want those people who are like, yes, this is my person. This is who I want to work for me.
Wow. That is, like you said, like, you make it sound easy, but it's not, you guys. It's going to take a while, and take your time. Like I said, take your time with it, but
and do it.
Gillian,
maybe
where can people
multiple weeks? Like, it doesn't have to be a one and done process. Like, take your time and come back to it in a week or two, and come back to it every month. I would argue spend like 10 minutes thinking about it.
Well, and I think too, it's a good foundation for like your website. Like, if you're just starting out, like, this could be the voice of your website. Like, really, people will get to know you because of what you're doing in this exercise. So it's not just your writing or just something you put, on your desk. This is really going to formulate your entire business. So very helpful, very awesome tool you gave us today, Gillian. So tell my audience here where they can find you online. Go ahead and give us a little.
Yeah. Well, so probably
you want.
The place that I am most kind of on social media is on Instagram. My handle is Jill Hill Edits, and Jill is with a G, but I can give you the link to it. So on Jill Hill Edits, I actually have a lot of writers there as my audience, even though I also write brand voice guides for clients. That audience there is fairly heavily writers. So I talk a lot about editing, and I talk a lot about brand voice. I share all the funny memes about editing and people getting writing wrong. So if you like to have a good laugh, then my stories are where I share all the memes on that stuff. But I do often talk about as writers how to do these kind of things. And then my website doesn't have a whole lot on it for business, for writers. My website is Jill Hill Writing Services, but that is where I have my course. I have a course on how to get that more linguistic information about how to write for somebody, and it uses free apps like Grammarly and ProWriting Aid. So there are very expensive voice courses. I've been through one of them that I really enjoyed. But if you're wanting to kind of dip your toe into a little bit more about how to use words and sentence structure, the course is like $40. It's in that affordable sense, and it uses the free versions of Grammarly and ProWriting Aid, so you can do it using, and in the Hemingway app, it uses free tools on the web.
Nice. Oh, that's pretty cool. That's good. That would be very useful. So thank you. Well, Gillian, thank you. I know you have lots of work to do before you got to go get your kiddos. So thank you for coming on today. Appreciate you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. It's been really nice to chat. And I would love to hear, like, if anyone has any questions about the worksheet or anything, then please let me know. I'm more than happy to hear how it goes for you.
And if you guys have any other questions, I will definitely pass them on to Gillian, or you can follow her over on Instagram. Send her a message over there. Thank you so much. You guys have an awesome day.
Okay. Thanks, Janine.
You're welcome. Bye.
That's a wrap for today's episode of The Savvy Scribe. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, we'd love for you to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. Until next time.